DJ scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Good rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And this evening, I have UFC 278. So you could say I have some appetizers for you. And I'm not in love with this card. It's not as stacked as the last couple pay-per-views that we've had. It just doesn't have as many name brand marquee fighters on it as some in the past, but I guess we can get right into that and talk about it. It's got some good fighters at the top, but really I guess maybe it's just because there's only one championship belt being defended, but we'll get into that and get into the picks and predictions. But let's just get into that and get into the first fight on the main card. So let's get to it. So can I get a menu? So I don't know. So the first fight, I mean, this is kind of an interesting fight here. At first, when I was just looking at some of the fight cards for it, I had to kind of look. It looks like Harry Hunsucker. It looks like he's actually moving down from heavyweight to fight Tyson Pedro. So that's kind of interesting, and it's weird. Some of these fights towards the bottom of the main card are just really not very good fights, at least in my opinion. They're just, I mean, when you look at Hunsucker's his last four fights, he's lost three of his last four fights. I mean, that's just, man, it's just not very exciting when you think of a pay-per-view, and then you got Tyson Pedro here. Maybe they expect Harry Hunsucker to be better at light heavyweight. Maybe he was fighting above his weight class. And then you got Harry Hunsucker, who in his last three fights, or last six fights, he's like 3-3. So he's like 500 over his last six fights as well. It's just not this. I know it's the first fight on the main card, but still, it's just not very exciting, really. Nothing to write home about, really. But just kind of a tough one for me to pick here. But just so Harry Hunsucker, he's lost his just from his last two fights. He lost Justin Tafa and Taya Tuivasa, and those were two heavyweight fights. So he got KO'd in both of those fights, knocked out by Justin Tafa, a head kick, and then Taya Tuivasa TKO. Which I mean Taya Tuivasa. I mean that's an elite heavyweight, and he's dropping down to light heavyweight now. So I mean Taya Tuivasa, he's about to fight for the belt, and so I mean I don't know. Now that he's moving down in weight class, I know you can't. It's kind of hard to judge him off of a fight like that against someone that he's like ranked number one in the standings about to fight for the belt. So that's really hard to pick. And then Tyson Pedro here, and going off of his last two fights, he fought Ike Villanueva, and he won by leg kick and punches, and then lost to Shogun Hua by TKO, and man, it's just a tough one for me to pick here. It's like almost flipping a coin for me, honestly. Uh, so I, I guess I'm just gonna go with I guess I'm just gonna go with Harry Hunsucker with this, and maybe hope the or not Harry Hunsucker or Tyson Pedro, because I'm just gonna assume that he's the favorite in this fight. That's what I'm assuming, and I just want to move on to the next fight because, like I said, some of these fights and towards the bottom of the card, like the first two fights, are just not very exciting. And then that's my that's kind of what I was getting to, and that's a light heavyweight fight, and that's kind of what I wanted to mention on this next fight between, which is a women's bantamweight fight between Wu Yana and Lucy Pudlova, and I'm surprised that they replaced that fight, replaced Marcin Tabora and Alexander Romanov fight, which I'm surprised that Wu Yana and Lucy Pudlova. I'm surprised that they replaced that fight with the Marcin Tabora Alexander Romanov fight. I don't know why they would move that fight with replace that fight with this fight. That's really surprising that they would do that. I mean, for the main card, I guess they wanted a better fight to main event the preliminary card. But I mean, come on, people are paying for the pay-per-view, and you're gonna put this, I don't know, these kind of undercard women fighters. I mean, Wu, Yana, Wu Yana has lost her last three fights. I mean, they're all by decision, two by decision, two by split decision. But I mean, come on, that's not very exciting. And then Lucy Pudlova, Lucy Pudlova is just now getting back into the UFC, which she's had a pretty strong run in Octagon 19, which I think is a Russian organization or somewhere like Ukraine, Russia, somewhere like that, Kazakhstan, somewhere like that. And she's had a good run while she's been there. She's like 7-1 since she's been there. But when she was in the UFC, she lost like her last four fights the last time she fought in the UFC. So I mean, that's just not a very exciting women's bout, really. So when you think of Lucy Pudlova and Wu Yana, that's not the first women's fight you think of when you think of a main event, like a UFC 278 or a numbered UFC card. Like again, just like the first fight on the main card, this is a hard one for me to pick, and just going off of that, I think I'm maybe gonna go with I guess I'm gonna go with Lucy Pudlova, because it looks like she's maybe matured a little bit since she's been uh, outside the UFC. Maybe it's helped her going to Octagon 19, and maybe she's matured and picked up some skills and having that little bit of a run and win streak. But it's hard to hard to know really what type of competition that she was fighting unless you watched all those Octagon events, which obviously I haven't really don't really follow too many other organizations outside the UFC, and maybe some Bellator and Ryzen sometimes, some of those other organizations. But until I just looked at her fight history and record, I'd never even heard of Octagon. And looks like Wu is on kind of falling on hard times with her last 3 fights, all losses. But I mean, sometimes it's hard, just losing decisions. So I think I'm gonna go with Lucy Pudlova for my prediction there. And I would imagine probably with that, it's probably going to just, if I was to guess, probably just a decision win. If I was going to this, if I was going to pick how that fight's going to go, how it's going to win, how it's going to, how she's going to win, or even if she doesn't win, how Wu would probably win. Probably just going to be a decision. Probably wouldn't be that exciting of a fight. And to go back to the light heavyweight fight between Tyson Pedro and Harry Hunsucker, I'm gonna guess that Tyson Pedro is probably gonna get knocked out, and if he doesn't get knocked out, then doesn't get the knockout, then he's probably gonna get knocked out. Someone's gonna get knocked out probably in that fight, would be my guess. But on to the next fight. Finally, getting past those fights, like if I ain't putting you to sleep, I'm about to put myself to sleep talking about those fights. So sorry if I'm putting people to sleep or people are checking out. Stick with me because I'm finally getting to the good fights. All right, finally, to the three good fights. We're finally getting to them. This is a bantamweight fight. Let me pick it up here a little bit. We got Jose Aldo versus Marab Dashwili, and this fight, this should be a pretty good fight, honestly. But this fight kind of reminds me a little bit, going back to a fight a while back. I gotta go look back to who he was fighting. I wish I remembered. It was all on that card. My memory's so bad. Yeah, it was Megamov Ankalov versus Anthony Smith. So this kind of reminds me of that card a little bit. And when Anthony Smith fought Merab Megamod Ankalov, and so I don't want to no disrespect to Jose Aldo at all, and Anthony Smith is not in Jose Aldo's even in the same stratosphere as Jose Aldo. Like Jose Aldo is a champion, like one of the youngest champions of all time, like a legend in WEC, a champion in the UFC, like he is a Brazilian, like legend, like an all-time great, like a UFC, like Hall of Famer, but it feels like his career is kind of like winding down, and almost like he's kind of becoming like a gatekeeper, like almost. But I don't want to I think I called Anthony Smith like a stepping stone almost, and that's kind of what happened to him. He got hurt in that fight against Megamod, but still, that's basically what he was for Megamod. But he's not. I'm not gonna say the same exact stuff that I said about him that I said about Anthony Smith. But it seems like that's maybe what Marab Dashvili is gonna be kind of using Jose Aldo as maybe in this fight. And I even heard people say that this is just maybe just in general bantamweight title fight eliminator. I don't know if that's maybe the case even for Jose Aldo, but maybe it is. I'm sure both of these fighters are both highly ranked regardless. So if Jose Aldo comes out and puts on an impressive performance, then I don't see why he wouldn't be right there in the title mix, like he pretty much always is and always has been in his entire career. But just like um, uh, how Anthony Smith got destroyed by Glover Teixeira, I just can't get out of my head when Peter Yan just destroyed Jose Aldo. Like he was just like beat him. Like it's very similar situation. Like after he like got like beat to death, it should have got stopped so much sooner. A similar situation. The ref just kept letting him get beat to death and beat it down like that. That's one of those situations where a fighter pretty much could have just retired after that, and no one would have argued. Like that's one of those things when like a fighter literally took another fighter's soul, and it's just hard to get those images out of your head after seeing a fighter get beat so bad. And it's just I don't know, you just don't look at a fighter the same after seeing them get beat on like that. So I almost so it's hard to look at Jose Aldo the same. And he's 35 years old now, and it's just he's not the same like 18-year-old great fighter. He's not the same young fighter that he was, the 21-year-old young guy that the baby face assassin that you remember him as. And just I could just go on and on about Jose Aldo, but so just to get to Merab Dashvili, I just feel like he's the young, very similar to Megamod Ankalaev. I feel that he's the younger guy, the up and comer, the guy that's probably gonna be fighting for the title pretty soon, and I feel that this fight is set up for him to beat Jose Aldo, a guy that's a former champion, and I feel that that's probably what will happen in this fight. And Dashvili, he's not someone that really gets a lot of finishes. He's only had like 4 stoppages in his 14 wins, and the rest have all been just the other 10 have just been decisions. So I imagine that's probably what this will be. I imagine it'll just be kind of a grind of a mix of striking and ground wrestling and stuff, and it'll probably just go to decision. Wouldn't Jose Aldo such a warrior? I wouldn't be surprised if it goes split decision, but I'm gonna go with Merab Dashvili in this one. All right, so on to the next fight. I have it's the co-main event, and that's the middleweight. It's a middleweight fight between Paulo Costa and Luke Rockhold. And watching the press conference, the pre-fight press conferences, and that stuff had me cracking up. Not just them, but also Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards. Man, the back and forth between Paulo Costa and Luke Rockhold, man, uh, was funny. I mean, Paulo Costa, he can barely speak English, and he was still roasting Luke Rockhold. I mean, that's pretty bad when the other guy can barely speak English and he still makes you look like a clown, Luke Rockhold, calling him old and telling him that he needs to stop dressing like a teenager. He needs to dress like his age. He needs to quit talking like a needs to talk his age and stuff like that. And you could see he was really getting under Luke Rockhold's skin by talking like that and saying that stuff to him. Man, that stuff was funny, man. I don't know, that stuff really had me cracking up when I watched it. And but man, Luke Rockhold, that's interesting. Really, I was a little surprised to see that he's even actually fighting after being out for what 3 years since 2019, and he's had in his last 4 fights, he's had some three devastating knockouts. I mean, bad, getting knocked out by Michael Bisping, Yolo Romero, and Jan Blachowicz. I mean, they were some devastating, like sprawled out on the canvas, like bad knockouts. But I mean, you think about it, when they first happened, you're like, oh man, he got knocked out. Like you're just thinking like he got knocked out, you know. But then you go back and look at who he got knocked out by, and in hindsight, those are some great fighters. So you got to think about the fighters he got knocked out by. Are the knockouts as bad as they were in hindsight? Because I mean, come on, Michael Bisping is a Hall of Famer. Jan Blachowicz ended up winning the belt, and then everyone knows how much of a freak Yolo Romero is. So in hindsight's kind of 2020 when you think of how much how those guys are animals, really. But at the time, you were like, oh well, he just got knocked out. He's a bum. But really, I mean, those are great fighters, really, when you think about it. Same thing when you go back and everyone remembers him getting knocked out by Vitor Belfort too, but that was a long time ago. That was in 2013. But I mean that was TRT Belfort. Of course, anyone was going to get knocked out by TRT Belfort, right? And he literally kicked his head off. I mean, does that even count, really? I mean, it does, but still, I mean, like in hindsight, those knockouts might not be as bad as everyone thinks, but still, I think that's another thing. Just like Paulo Costa said, you kind of have to take Luke Rockhold's age kind of into the discussion here, and he's 37 years old, and even though he's taken 3 years off, he has had some devastating knockouts in his career. I know I'm kind of contradicting myself a little bit, but I'm taking the age into consideration, and I'm taking the knockouts into consideration. But I still I have something to say about Paulo Costa as well. It seems like he's had a little bit of a bump in his road as well. You know, it seems like he's he's never really had much adversity in his career. You know, he won just coming into the UFC and mixed martial arts in general. He won his first 13 fights, and then his first five fights in the UFC, and then he's lost his last two fights. And it seems like ever since he got dry humped by Israel Adesanya, seems like he's kind of maybe lost a little bit of confidence, and what he missed weight by like 20 pounds and said that he lost the fight to Israel Janajay because he was drinking wine the night before or something crazy like that. So I, I don't know. I think he uh, so, but um, I still think Paulo Costa is the younger fighter and has the knockout power that he's probably gonna. I think I think he's gonna probably more than likely is gonna knock Luke Rockhold out in the first round. But would it surprise me if Luke Rockhold ends up ends up pulling some judo, not judo, but Brazilian jiu-jitsu out of nowhere and ends up dominating Paulo Costa on the ground or ends up submitting him or doing something like that, like the old Luke Rockhold, the Luke Rockhold that won the light heavyweight championship comes out of nowhere and ends up dominating Paulo Costa on the ground. It wouldn't surprise me honestly, because like I said, it seems like Paulo Costa has kind of lost his mojo a little bit. But I think I'm gonna go with Paulo Costa, and I think he's gonna win by knockout in the first round. All right, and then finally we have the welterweight um, welterweight championship um, match championship match, and for the title, and that's the main event, and that's Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards, and this has a long backstory for mostly for Leon Edwards because I guess he's been trying to get this fight for a long time, or he's had a lot of fights canceled and rescheduled, and he he's actually fought Kamaru Usman before, and that was a long time ago. That was December 19th, 2015, and that was just a pretty convincing decision loss to Kamaru Usman, and then he goes on to fight Bilal Muhammad, and he only really won the first round, and then early in the second round, uh, ended in a no contest due to an eye poke. Which myself, I kind of thought that fight should have been rescheduled, but it never did. He ended up went through like a saga of trying to get a fight scheduled between Kazmat Jemaya, but it kept getting rescheduled due to COVID, and then finally, on like the third time, I think Jemaya ended up pulling out, and then finally, ended up having a title fight eliminator with I guess that's with Nate Diaz, and he ended up winning that, and it was not a great fight really. It was pretty definitive. Definitive. I take that back. It was pretty definitive win by Leon Edwards. I guess I say it wasn't a great fight, but I'm a fan. I've been a long time fan of Nate Diaz, so I guess I'm being a little bit of a hater, I guess. Um, but now we're to Kamaru Usman. But finally, he's got his match with Kamaru Usman, and then I guess see Kamaru Usman, he's on the long winning streak. He's only lost one fight in his career. Yeah, one fight in his career, and he's on like the longest winning streak in UFC middleweight history, and he has the win over Jorge Masvidal, which that's also part of the history with Leon Edwards, because I think that was one of the fights that he was expected to fight, but I guess Jorge Masvidal pulled out of that fight as well. That was the whole two-piece Minnesota thing, which that never ended up happening as well. But uh, when I picked this fight as well, I think Kamaru Usman said a lot of talking going on, a little bit of talking going on in their press conference as well. But I think before that, Kamaru Usman said that he's gonna finish plans to finish Leon Edwards. Uh, but I think during the press conference there was a little bit of back and forth going on. Leon Edwards making fun of how Kamaru Usman was dressed, but I, I think this should be a pretty good fight. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up being fight of the night. And Leon Edwards has never been finished either. I mean, this should be a very interesting fight. But a lot of times, fights like this, both guys that are such like prestige, uh, end up being like tentative. The first one doesn't know like when to react, when to strike, so they're like tentative. But this very well could just end up going 5 rounds. But uh, I think Kamaru Usman's like pressure. I mean, the first fight was just. I'm pretty sure the first fight was just a 3-round fight, and I think he started wearing on him towards the end. Yeah, the first fight was just a 3-round fight, and towards the end, Kamaru Usman was kind of like pressuring him. But this is a 5-round fight because it's a title fight, and I think due to that, Kamaru Usman will end up getting the finish, TKO finish, either in the 4th or the 5th round. So I think I'm gonna go with Kamaru Usman to defend his belt via TKO either late in the 4th or in the 5th round. So with that, I have in the first fight, I have a light heavyweight fight. I have Tyson Pedro winning that fight with the women's. In the second fight, I have women's bantamweight fight. I have Lucy Podlovich, and I keep having trouble with her name, Lucia Podlova. There we go. With that one, and in the third fight, I have a bantamweight fight, Marab Dashvili. In the middleweight fight, I have Paulo Costa, and in the co-main event, I have Paulo Costa, and in the welterweight, in the main event, I have welterweight championship fight. I have Kamaru Usman retaining the belt, and I think that's all I got for you. And with that, can I get a check, please?